wrong time to cut spending. I would say to balance the budget, we should raise taxes temporarily.
Well, thank you. Great question. The first point I want to make is that I would not have used unallotment last year. I think unallotment is a necessary power of the governor, but I think it is an emergency power of the governor and ought to be reserved for emergency purposes. I think there was an opportunity to negotiate last year. The reality is that if all of the unallotment is ruled illegal, then it's a $3 billion hole halfway through the biennium. I mean, in one way to think about it is it's the equivalent of nearly a $6 billion problem at a time when we have a budget of about $31, $32 billion. We're talking 20% of the state's operating budget. So we're going to have to come in with honest solutions that do involve a mix of spending cuts and do involve some additional revenue, some tax increases. But it has to be an approach that I believe starts with having conversations with Minnesotans to say, here's the challenge, here's the need, here's the opportunity, how do we move forward? The one thing I would urge our legislators is don't walk away from the problem, stay involved, and if that means that we have to go past the May 17th deadline, we need to get this right.
Again, I'm going to ask all the questions. David is going to, when he holds up the yellow sign, the minute is.
The solution is really threefold. It's going to require cuts, in some cases big and painful cuts. We can't spend money and continue to spend money the state just doesn't have. We need tax reform, and that comes in the form of tax reductions, some tax increases, and making sure we are more business friendly, so we encourage businesses to expand here in Minnesota and not elsewhere, to get people working again and generate more income tax revenue. And we also have to be creative. Times like this not only deserve, but they require creativity and innovative solutions. I've put out two already with the so-called fat tax and the consideration of riverboat gambling. It needs a leader who can stand up and say, these are different ideas to consider for new streams of revenue. Not all of them will work necessarily, but we have to put those ideas out there and then work with the legislature, both the Republicans and the Democrats.
If you're looking for an example of the failure of our government, of the failure of a lack of leadership, this is a great example. It never should have come down to this point. The governor's job is to provide leadership, and he should have worked with the legislature so none of this had to happen. A governor should have said the legislature will have to stay in session. He should have called a special session to work this out and not to let this linger and go on and on. It has to be resolved quickly. There do need to be a number of cuts, but we can't cut everything across the board, just a 5 or 10% cut across the board. We have to focus on not hurting the people who are the most vulnerable. As governor, we need to increase the revenue streams. I can do that, I know how to do that, and we need to make cuts where there can be cuts made. There's a lot of fat in the state government. There's a lot we can work with to resolve this problem.
As a former teacher, adjunct professor, standing is natural for me, so I ask your forgiveness. I wouldn't have used unallotment, but I'm going to stop right there because I'm going to tell you this, that I believe that this is an issue, the unallotment issue is one of the reasons why the stars are getting in order for an independent governor to take the leadership role, working both sides of the aisle, and I am going to capture that opportunity for you. And I will push through plans that I think the Republicans, after they've done their thing and the Democrats have done their thing, will see that the middle of the road, both sides of the aisle approach will work. Now, I think everyone in this room understands that Minnesota is facing one of the most dire economic times that you can imagine. And again, it's time for an independent governor. Thank you.
David Allen, Legislative District 41B, Congressional District 3. I'd like the candidates to answer whether they're going to accept the endorsement of this convention and or are they going to continue on if they don't get endorsed and run in the primary?
Great question. Simple answer is that absolutely I'm going to accept and eagerly ask for and respect the endorsement of this convention. And if there is unanimity among the candidates to stop at this process and for everybody to accept the endorsement process, I certainly would do that.
I will accept graciously the endorsement today, and if I don't get it, I will move forward to the primary.
And I will accept the endorsement. I probably will not move on to the primary depending on the outcome of the vote.
I would obviously accept the endorsement. If I did not get it, I would run in the primary.
If I do well here today and get your endorsement, or you grant me your endorsement, or if I finish second, I'm going to keep going. Otherwise, I'm going to stop. I'll stop today, and I'll be working to help these fellows with their campaigns.
Hi, Joe Herbst, District 3, Tonka Bay. I'd like to get the candidates' ideas on the connection between energy and the environment in regards to Minnesota and the governor's role in addressing impacts and/or opportunities presented by that.
Well, Tom and I had the good fortune of participating in a Green Expo this past Sunday, and I actually elicited some hissing from the crowd there, so I better be careful how I respond. No, the reality is I'm going to respond as I always do, without any real filter. I think when we look at energy, whether it's renewable or fossil fuel or nuclear, it has to make sense. Whatever investment and whatever government-led and governor-led proposals are out there, they have to make sense financially for the end user. We can't just be putting up windmills because it's the fad of the day. We can't just be investing in solar energy because we think it makes sense. We have to have a clear-cut idea of how we're going to get that energy to the end user and how it can benefit the end user financially as well as through an energy way.
The future in this country belongs to those who can produce energy. And what we need is leadership in this state to make Minnesota an energy producer. I think we could make Minnesota the Texas of the country through using wind, through using biofuels. Now, biofuels, I'm not talking about corn ethanol. I'm not a big fan of corn ethanol. But I think the technology is out there, and I think we can encourage entrepreneurs to come into the state and to create biofuels. And I think we can make enough biodiesel for everyone who uses diesel in their cars in the state, and maybe enough so that we can sell it to other states.
I happen to be in the biomass business, and I believe strongly in the resources that Minnesota has. I'm going to tell you something that you probably don't know. There are other resources. There's a company here in this area that basically has designed turbines to go in the bottom, out of sight, out of mind, in the rivers of the Mississippi, which has got enough generating power to put these generation units in strings, and you're now using hydroelectric to get the power. Back to the biomass. Over at the university, there's a professor there who basically has wonderful studies that point out that prairie grass, which you're going to hear a little bit more about in my presentation, is a far better product than corn. And of course, we've got the issue of corn for food and corn for ethanol. I believe in ethanol. I believe we ought to promote it. But we have to keep an eye on our supply of corn to feed ourselves and feed the world. So I'm going to be telling you more about this afternoon, and I think you're going to be excited about it.
Could you repeat the question? Whoever asked.
The question was in regards to the connections between energy and the environment and what role Minnesota may play in addressing an impact or opportunity.
The best thing that government could do would be to streamline its regulatory process, to take out the nonsense and the many years and millions of dollars it takes to get things off the ground. I do not believe that this is a time that government should be engaging in great, big, expensive projects. We should not be taking government inefficiency and adding it to a new sector of energy or a new sector of the economy. Windmills are great. Dams can be good, can be bad. Nuclear probably should grow. But to throw government money at a problem is to take away its competitive edge, not to help it. Education-wise, we can help in that field. We can educate the people who will further these industries, and we can streamline our regulatory processes. But I do not believe that it's the right time for direct government spending in a new area. We should deal with what we have now before we start a new project.
Well, I appreciate that Chris asked for the question to be repeated because I think some of the answers have missed the point. Of course, energy ought to be responsive to the end user. That's the whole point of having utilities and producing energy is for the end users. But it has to be environmentally responsible. It has to protect Minnesota's advantages that we have in cost, not just with other states, but within the state. It's all well and good to have wind energy and to subsidize utilities for wind energy if you happen to live in a part of the state that has a lot of wind, or if you happen to be around a lot of politicians. If you happen to live up in War Road, then it's not such a great deal. You end up subsidizing other parts of the state. Minnesota can't afford to lose its competitive edge. We need to invest in research at the university. We also need to invest in changing the tax system so that that research coming out of the university can take root and grow and create new jobs in Minnesota, new energy sources that keep us competitive, that are responsible for the environment, and that move us forward.
We're just going to take a quick announcement here, 1 second.
I don't need the mic. Okay. Folks, we're going to be suspending the registration, so we can do our final counts before we start doing balloting coming up here. If you have not registered, please do so now, okay? Hopefully everybody has. Second, everybody's got these name badges. When you're done here today, please turn them in. This is called efficiency. Recycling these badges will help save money. As far as the little actual paper inside there, feel free to bring it home, frame it, do whatever you like.
And just so you know, unfortunately, we're still going to break at noon, so it looks like we're only going to have time for 2 more questions. So I apologize to those of you who are waiting in line, but unlikely to look at the end. Thank you. Neil Olmsted, Congressional District 5. I recently, over the last session, wrote my House and Senate representatives in regards to the bonding list. And one of the responses I received back, he expressed hope that with the support of a new governor, they'd revisit the bonding list in the next session. Would you, as governor, support that? And if so, is there any particular bonding issues you'd like to see go forward that didn't make it through in the last session? Thank you.
I think a very close look has to be taken at those bonding bills. Now, the payment for those, of course, is differently from standard state services, but we have gotten over the last several years into the habit of just spending way too much money. We have to take a very careful look at what we're putting the state money into. I think we've been doing way too much. Everyone likes to have new buildings. Everyone likes to have new things added to the state infrastructure, but we have done way too much, and we have to take a very close look at it. I would probably not approve all the bonding measures currently in the legislature. I think there's just too much there. We have to learn to tighten our belts. We have to learn to cut back.
I would agree in all respects with Jim Koepke, but I would take another look at this from another standpoint. At the macroeconomic level, bonding as a process throughout the world is coming under increasing fire. And I think that here in Minnesota, because we are not an island, we're part of the global village, we have to look at how bonding really works. And now back to his point, absolutely, we're spending too much money in too many areas and using the bonding mechanism to make it work. And I probably would be one of the first persons as governor to make sure that all of these issues regarding bonding were put under the microscope of financial concern. Thank you.
I don't know.
How do you follow that? although we need a governor who does know. So let me give you a couple of responses. First of all, next year, we're going to have a $7 billion shortfall. Bonding is not free money. That's on top of the $3 billion that we just talked about. So we are going to have to make some hard choices. But bonding can be a good investment. A couple of things. To answer specifically the question of what would I have signed, I think there is great value in some of the science buildings at St. Cloud State where we need to invest in the research, the opportunity, the talent, the curriculum to develop new people for our growing life sciences industry. If we want to be the Silicon Valley of life sciences, we need not just to have the investment capital, we also need to have the talent. That's the first thing. Second thing is that I would like to see a long-term strategy so we can start mapping out, not make commitments, but have a long-term plan so we know where we're going. And thirdly, I think we have to rethink what we bond for. It shouldn't be just bricks and mortar. Senator Bonoff has a very innovative bill that would allow us to bond for technology infrastructure. I think we fall far short in Minnesota of integrating technology into government.
In a time when we're facing, as Tom said, a huge deficit, a projected deficit right now, we have to really scrutinize where investments are made across the board, particularly in bonding. And I think in these times, a governor must stand up and lead and say, there are two things that are really important when it comes to the bonding bill. Jobs, not just the jobs that will come through construction jobs, but the jobs that whatever is built will create in the long term, and that we invest in education, like the research at St. Cloud State. I love the arts, but I don't think Orchestra Hall really warrants bonding in a time where we're facing such a huge deficit. So we have to pick and choose, and that's not going to make everyone happy, but it's the long-term approach and what it does to keep people working as well as invest in our people and our future.
This will be the last question.
I'm sure each of you have issues that are near and dear to your heart. So I want to know, what's the one issue that you would most like to address, and how do you plan to do so?
Thank you. But before I answer that question, I want to applaud you people. I don't think I've ever seen the intensity of an audience, and I've seen a lot of audience like this, and I think you deserve a round of applause. I'm going to give up a little bit of my presentation, and I'm going to concentrate on what I, as governor, would do with the IP party. And this is already in print. Number one, as it was already said here, I would want to take, and believe I can with your support, this party to the national level. The other thing, however, on a closer to home level, is I want to make sure that this party is truly inclusive. And as I scan the panel here, I don't see that we really have got representation from some of the big blocks that we need to be talking to. So I would be working on that issue. And the other one, really close to home, and you're going to hear a little bit more about this, is a IP party that has got a truly level and well-lit playing field.
Ma'am, I really appreciate the question because there was a thing I wanted to say in the speech and it just wasn't relevant to most people who would be here. So I took it out, but you gave me the chance here. As a northerner, it's very upsetting to me to see my part of the state stuck in a recession that's been going on for 50 years now. Everybody's suffering now, but up north we've been losing population since the 1950s. There is one single cause that can be pointed to more than others, and it's that well-meaning people in the southern part of the state where the bulk of the population are, they want to protect the environment, and they want to set aside ever more northern land for the rest of the state. It's crippling the north. There probably shouldn't be any more governmental land purchases or restrictions north of the 47th parallel. In some counties, the vast majority of property is governmentally owned, and it's not fair.
It's a great question, and let me respond to it first in broad terms and then secondly specifically. Leadership isn't doing what you want to do. It is rallying people around what needs to be done. And what needs to be done in Minnesota is to put our fiscal house in order. I mean, Chris touched on it with the economy in northern Minnesota. We've heard about it in energy. Minnesota has serious problems. We are at a critical crossroads, and people need to understand just how serious the challenge is. A $7 billion shortfall in the next budget cycle and $5 to $7 billion after that. There will be no room to do anything, to grow as a state, to invest in kids, to invest in education, to invest in the infrastructure if we don't make the tough choices that are going to be needed to get our fiscal house in order and create jobs and move Minnesota forward. So my commitment is to go in, work with Democrats, Republicans, take the tough votes, and if that means I'm a one-term governor, it means I'm a one-term governor who is leaving behind a much better Minnesota.
I hope I understood your question correctly, because I'm going to answer not with what is my #1 priority or even in my top 5 priorities, but something that's close to me. One thing I want to see done when I'm governor is the reform of our family law system. We need to have the legal presumption that shared physical custody for parents going through divorce is in the best interest of the children and of the parents. We've ignored it for way too long. We've let lawyers and the courts get into matters where they shouldn't. And as governor, I want to do what's right. Not because it affects me. I had the unfortunate situation of going through a divorce, and we did okay. You know, we came out of it with good time with our kids, shared time, not exactly even time, but that's okay. I'm working for people who have to go through this, unfortunately, in the future, and I want to make sure that both sets of parents have equal time to spend with their kids, and it takes some government involvement to change the family law as we know it right now.
My passion is jobs. There's nothing more important than a person having a job. You need to feed your family. You need to pay your rent. You need to have the dignity that comes with having a job. Now, I don't think government should ever create jobs. I don't think government does that well, but government can create an environment that allows companies to start up jobs. And in my speech later on this afternoon, I will talk about the business plan I have developed that will, within 2 years, create full employment in the state of Minnesota. And this state will be an oasis in the middle of the economic turmoil that has gripped this country, and I think will continue to grip this country. We can make Minnesota at full employment within 2 years. That's my passion.
All right, well, first, if we could just give a round of applause to the candidates. Thank you.